Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be talking about how we can develop web applications using a web framework called Astro. So before we get into the specifics of Astro, I'd like to make a distinction between library and framework because these terms are often used interchangeably. So you can think of a library as a specific software component or a module that is integrated into a system. Often, a library serves the purpose of implementing a particular functionality. On the other hand, a framework is can be thought of as the system itself. It allows a developer to manage the complexity of app development. It does so by minimizing the decisions that the developer has to make. For example, by integrating multiple libraries into the framework, and a framework serves to implement a particular methodology as opposed to a particular functionality. So the main concept that you need to take note of while making a distinction between a library and a framework is the inversion of control. So your application code calls libraries, while a framework calls your code by providing places where you can plug in the application code. So let's look at some examples to make this distinction even more clear. So an example of a library is React, and there are multiple frameworks that leverage the functionalities provided by React, such as Create React App, and Design, Next.js, and Chakra UI, to name just a few of them. So now let's talk about what Astro is specifically. Astro is an all-in-one web framework that speeds up the process of developing web applications. In their own words, Astro provides the powerful development experience which meets with lightweight output. Here is a graph based on a report that HTTP Archive has come up with based on the Lighthouse performance data. And as you can clearly see, Astro outpaces the other frameworks such as Gatsby, Next.js, WordPress, and Nux by a mile. Why should you choose Astro? Well, one of the reasons is that Astro is content focused. And that means that, well, what do we mean by content focus? It basically integrates with many popular CMS, such as Contentful, Storyblock, WordPress, and so on. Astro comes with Markdown support, so you can also build pages on your web application using Markdown files, as you can see in this example, where you create a Hello World page by specifying the title and some other Markdown syntax. Basically, Astro does this under the hood by using a library called MDX, which allows it to render Markdown as HTML and CSS under the hood. Astro is also compatible with many of the popular JS and CSS libraries that you might be familiar with. For example, React, Solid.js, Svelte, Vue, Preact, which are some of the UI frameworks, and it also provides support for CSS libraries like Tailwind and Partytown, for example. Astro comes with support for many of the popular package managers such as npm, pnpm, and yarn. You also don't need to worry about transpiling TypeScript to JavaScript in order to run Astro web apps, because it ships with TypeScript support right out of the bat. It allows you to import TS and TSX files. TSX basically stands for is the TypeScript version of JSX, or JavaScript over XML, which you will be familiar with if you have developed using React. Astro also allows writing TypeScript code within Astro components itself, which I'll get to later on during the presentation. You can also use a VS Code Astro extension for type inference. And finally, you can manage the TypeScript related configuration using a file called tsconfig.json. Apart from providing flexibility with what kind of libraries you can use for JS and CSS development, and also like providing TypeScript support and so on. Another nice thing about Astro is that you can deploy Astro apps on multiple platforms. As you can see here, there's a deployment guide for nearly all the platforms you can think of, such as Netlify, Vercel, GitHub Pages, and even Cloudflare or AWS and Google Cloud. In our previous workshop, we covered about Deno, and you can actually even integrate with Deno to deploy the app on Deno deploy. We can also connect multiple backend services to our Astro apps, such as Firebase or Supabase. And this is again a way of showing how flexible Astro apps are actually. Often when you are developing web applications, you need to work with environment variables, at least when you're developing them. You might have a separate mechanism for handling environment variables for production apps. But with Astro, there's an easy way of putting all your app related secrets into environment variables and then fetching those secrets. So basically, as you can see over here, you can the syntax that you need to use is import.meta.env, and then basically you type the name of you put the name of whatever your environment variable is. So this functionality is enabled because Astro builds on top of a site generator called White, which basically provides the mechanism for importing environment variables. If you have worked with React apps before, you might be familiar with import aliases. And Astro also provides a mechanism for handling these aliases. Basically, you can import other Astro components or view React components or even image files using a consistent alias syntax. And that makes development very easy, and Astro also provides this feature out of the bat. So before you start developing applications in Astro, it's a good exercise to go through some of the Astro recipes, which are basically code snippets for implementing some of the functionality that you might need in your Astro web application. Here I have highlighted two of the recipes which I think are the most important, which is basically sharing state between Astro islands and sharing state between Astro components. So basically, again, if you have used a UI framework such as React, you would know that sharing state between components is a very important part of the process, because that's the way you can ensure that whatever state you want to maintain throughout the application and modify through user actions is consistent across different parts of the web application. So basically, you can use the same mechanism for sharing state between Astro components and between islands. So what islands are basically they are a mechanism for encapsulating different kinds of components. Components which are not Astro components, such as React, Vue, or other or components from other UI frameworks. Basically, Astro, if you want to sum up whatever I mentioned in all the previous slides, basically Astro provides a robust ecosystem for web application development, which means that you're likely to find everything you would need in just one place. To get you started with development using Astro, you can try out some of the templates. These are available on a website called astro.new, and you can also open them up in a interface called StackBlitz, which helps you to view web applications as they would appear in the browser as you are developing your applications. So you can think of them as you can think of it as similar to other popular platforms such as Code Sandbox and CodePen. Finally, Astro comes bundled with a great community support because they they take up a lot of questions on their Discord channel. So you can find a link to the Discord channel on the Astro documentation website, which I highly encourage you to go through. I've the screenshots I've provided are basically from the Astro documentation website. All right. I'll now move on to show you some code demos for my Astro apps. So I have built this. See, yeah, I have built this demo Astro app called Movie Journal. So what it basically does is you can enter a movie name into the search box. Let's say A Beautiful Mind. Yeah, and it loads up certain search results. Yeah, basically it renders an icon when there's no movie poster available. And once you click on a watch button, it renders it as a list of top 10 movies I have watched.
We can't see any
Oh,
project right now.
wait.
I
All
think you're
right,
only
I think
sharing
I
your
will.
audio.
Oh, wait. Okay, let me just go back to the website again. Okay. I'll just restart the application. Yeah, basically, um, you're supposed to like the application is a simple one which helps you to track all the movies that you have watched or you want to watch. So you can enter a movie name, let's just say Spider-Man, for example, and yeah, you can see all the movie titles with Spider-Man in it, and those movie titles that don't have a poster associated with it are rendered with an icon. And basically, you can click on the watch button, in which case it will show amongst the top 10 movies I have watched. And if you click want to watch, then it will show up in the top 10 movies I want to watch. So you can do this, and uh, basically after that you can also delete the movies from your watch list. Yeah. Some, yeah. So basically, in order to create this app, can show some. Can you see my screen even now?
No, I think on Zoom you're sharing only one window. Maybe you have to share the different windows.
But were you able to see my web application as well?
No, no, I think you're only sharing. Is that Keynote? Yeah, I think you're only sharing Keynote.
Oh,
And Zoom.
wait 1 minute. Let me just share all over again. Desktop. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
now I can see it.
Okay, now you can see it, right? Sorry. I'll just show my demo again. So you can enter a movie name. Uh, Basically, you can see the results associated with the title, and you can click either the watch button or the want to watch, and then the movies will show up in the respective lists. You can also delete the movies from the watch list. So
So this
I
is
create,
serverless.
sorry,
This is serverless.
I didn't quite get your
Is there a
question.
backend or just a?
Well, basically, I'll show you the application just to help you understand how I did it. Like I didn't have any backend here. I basically just made request to an API. So let me see. Let me open up my, yeah. So basically, I created this app using Astro. Um, so there is an index.astro, which is like the main component, and this basically is the HTML associated with index.astro is within this other Astro file called layout.astro, where you can see some of the things like the head tag and meta, which would appear in your main web page. And basically, the remaining components within the app are all written using React, and they're imported accordingly. Um, and when you're importing any other components apart from Astro components, you need to make sure that you add this keyword client load. Otherwise, it won't be rendered as a regular React app, or sorry, a regular React component, for example. So basically, um, I created like the search box in the form of a form. And what it does is basically once you click on the search button, it sends a request to the OMDB API. And for each of the movies, it will fetch the data from the API and then add it to a movie store. So basically, as I'd mentioned, sorry, previously, you can share state between Astro components or between Astro islands, and there's a common mechanism for it. And this is handled by a library called Nano Stores, which I have installed as a dependency over here. And basically, um, I have a TypeScript file called movie store where basically you can initialize a store using a function called atom, and the writable atom is just a type which you can use for any object that is created using the atom function. And uh, I won't get into too much details because it will take a bit of time to explain the whole thing. But the basic idea is that you have a store for whatever state you want to use within whichever you want to share between the different components or different Astro islands. And basically, when you want to fetch any of the any object that is stored within the store, then you use the get method. And if you want to set a value, then you use the set method. So that's, you can do that within the TypeScript file itself, the store TypeScript file. But now, how do you access the stores within your React components? Well, you can use a handler called useStore that basically takes in a movie store. In this case, basically, I've passed it either of the two movie stores that I've created, which are the watch movie store and want to watch movie store, apart from the fetch movie store. And basically, basically, once you invoke the use store on that object, it gives you whatever is the current state that's stored within the store object. So like when you're initially starting out, basically all the store contains an empty array because there's no movies that have been added to either of the watch lists or which are showed in the search results box. And once you have updated those through your user interactions, such as pressing the search button or clicking on the watch or want to watch, then those will be updated accordingly. So basically, instead, like in a normal React application, what you tend to do is you have an upper level component or a higher level component, let's say app, and that can store some state, and then it propagates through to the lower level or children component through the React props. And you can yeah, basically that's a way you can pass around state between different components. But the nanostores library provides an easier way of handling different states, because you can just like pass those around, like you can export those from a TypeScript file and then import it into a component and then use the use store to basically fetch the current state of that store, and then render your component accordingly. So this, if you want more details, you can actually check the Astro documentation website, which which is quite comprehensive in my opinion, and like explains things pretty well. So as I mentioned, you can check out the Astro recipes, and basically these are the two important ones: sharing state between islands and sharing state between Astro components, at least to start with. Then obviously as you get further and further, and depending on the functionality you want to build into your application, you can have a look at the other recipes. So right now, basically, I was demonstrating how to share state between React components. And since like React components are not Astro components, you can check this recipe. So basically, if you're using npm, you can like install it this way, but there's a similar mechanism for installing this library if depending on the package manager you're using. And yeah, what this shows is a a simple example which has the same concept. basically you initialize a uh, a store using the atom function, and then invoke the object stored within the store, or actually get that out using a useStore function. And basically, once you get the state out, then you can uh, do some conditional rendering based upon that state. There's another mechanism within that's called maps, but you I think that will be more useful if you are working with JSON objects as state, rather than as with arrays or other JavaScript uh, like native objects. Um, yeah. So basically, like through this demo application, I just wanted to show that you can uh, yeah, you can basically uh, build an Astro application where you can create components not just using Astro, but then also using um, other UI frameworks like React, Vue, or any other that you might be familiar with and which is supported by Astro. Um, yeah, basically, actually, let me also show you another application which is my own website that I basically built using Astro Wind, or it's another framework that builds on top of Astro and Tailwind. Um, but the concepts involved in uh, the web application development are similar. So my application basically has um, different pages like about me, um, a calendar showing my calendar, then my favorite music, podcasts, my projects, resume, and the different tools I use. And um, basically, I've created all these pages using not Astro or React components, but using Markdown files. Um, so this is the calendar page, for example, and the Markdown involves two different fields here: layout and title. So basically, this syntax, this is known as front matter, and you can often actually even do put like JavaScript code inside this. So this is like a mechanism for the backend to interact with the front end. So you can pass around um, like variables and so on, like from the server into client using this. But over here, when I'm using Markdown, I'm basically what I'm doing here is I'm saying that the layout for the calendar page should follow from the page layout Astro component, which looks like this. Um, and the title of the page should be calendar, which uh, yeah. So and basically the rest of this is I've basically just used HTML over here, but that's the thing you can do with Markdown files as well. Like you can use Markdown syntax or include HTML within your code as well. Let me see another example. Yeah. Mm. Actually, yeah, over here I've just ended up using more of sorry, more of HTML syntax, even though I've written in a Markdown file, but you can actually change it to just Markdown. For example, if you want to change the heading, you can you can also use the Markdown syntax. Let's see. I haven't run the application. Let me run it again. I think it's taking some time to run. Uh, mm, uh, not sure. Yeah, not sure why it's not running properly, but the idea is basically like in the Markdown file, you can also uh, use the Markdown syntax as well as the HTML. So that's how I've created these pages. So you don't need to write full-fledged Astro components or React components for your pages. But the name of the important thing to take note is that the name of the file should match its route. So here I have a base URL for my domain and the calendar as a subroute. So you should have a file called calendar. It could be a Astro file, calendar.astro, or it could be just a regular Markdown file. Okay. I think for uh, basically that's all I had for my demo. You can also check out the different Astro templates using astro.new. Thank you. I I think there were some questions. Yeah, Autumn asked what is CMS. So actually, CMS stands for Content Management System. And yeah, uh, yeah. I hope I've answered the question about how Markdown files can support both Markdown and standard HTML and CSS. You can actually even test this out on any other Markdown file, for example, on GitHub, where you can mix both HTML and Markdown syntax. As long as you make sure you don't, as long as you make sure you follow certain conventions, like you don't uh, put them in the same line, but actually spread them out over different lines.